Well, MLB opened Pandora's box by changing all of their rules and implementing a pitch clock. So now, fuck it, we're just changing everything now. We're going to get crazy with the rules. Yeah, a lot of people don't like the pitch clock, but Jesse and I, at least one of the two of us, is big fans of how fast games are going.
Oh, I am totally a big fan. Don't try to put that on.
He still wants a 3-hour game every once in a while. Not in this camp.
I'm not like, yeah, if your games average 2.5 hours, you're still going to get a 3-hour game every now and then. I'm not going to protest the occasional 3-hour game.
Sub 2 hours.
Oh my, you're a monster.
I'm a madman.
You're an absolute
now.
monster.
But anyway, I'm not as big of a monster as Major League Baseball, who continues to try in the Atlantic League. They're experimenting with new rules in the Atlantic League, which is an independent baseball league. And some of them are kind of wild, I think. The new rules that they're experimenting with include a designated pinch runner, which means that each team will be allowed to designate a player who is otherwise not in the starting lineup as a designated pinch runner. That player may in turn be substituted at any point into the game as a base runner, and the player who is substituted for, as well as the pinch runner, may then return to the game without penalty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like you can pinch run for, anybody. Aaron Judge or someone that you would normally never want to take out of the game, and you're not actually taking them out of the game. It's a temporary thing. Aaron Judge just comes right back afterwards.
What's the thought on this?
What's the thought? Like, what are they trying to do?
What do you think? Like, what? Because, okay.
Are they just making stuff up?
Well, okay. We've seen the rules that have been implemented this year. We knew that when they were being tested that they made a certain amount of success because you had an end goal in mind, right? The end goal was making baseball games shorter. They figured we could do this with the pitch clock. They wanted to increase offense in baseball. They figured they could increase the size of the bases. They also figured the pitch clock thing with the disengagements would impact stolen bases and offense, as well as the banning of the shifts, right? So there was an end goal to these things. What is the end goal for a designated pinch runner rule? Is that just to save, let's say, like an Aaron Judge from the mileage that he's putting on his body by having to run around the bases? Is it just to generate more runs? Is it just to have a speedier, more exciting player on the base path than somebody that says going to trot from first to second and get out easily?
I think it's mostly that last one. It's that Major League Baseball has done extensive polling among fans at this point. They want to know what plays do fans enjoy the most. And stolen bases have been identified as one of the, I think it's like a top 3 thing that fans enjoy most about baseball games. And stolen bases have gone nearly extinct in recent years, right? Not entirely. There are still guys who do it, but as the analytics movement is kind of taken center stage in this sport, teams are recognizing that stolen bases are not worthwhile, right? If you steal 70 bases, but you get caught 25 times, it's unclear if you actually helped your team. You might have done a disservice to your team, and teams have recognized that over the years as some of these numbers have gotten better and better at explaining the game in front of us. So Major League Baseball wants more stolen bases, and they know that if they have a designated runner who specializes in that, it would add kind of a fun element to the game.
But where does the madness stop? Do we just have a guy lined up like a sprint runner next to the batter while he's hitting, and so that he never has to actually run himself? He can just hit the ball and then that guy goes. No, that shit would be electric, and I would be on board with that if we're just gonna just say fuck it at this point.
So you're saying it's like trying to think like who's one of the slower guys on the D-backs. Like, all right, Carson Kelly comes back from injury. Yeah. He hits it into the gap.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't use Corbin Carroll in this role. He would be starting. It's a player who starts the game on the bench. So I don't know.
Let's just say Jake McCarthy was.
Let's say Jake McCarthy. So Carson Kelly hits it into the gap, but Jake McCarthy is lined up right there at home plate,
just next to him.
Yeah, tied at the hip. And the moment the ball is in play, Jake McCarthy runs to first base, and Carson Kelly just stands there and watches.
And just watches with the bat on his shoulder, probably. Does a little flip, and then walks back to the dugout.
Yeah, that is not what this is. Okay. Carson Kelly would still be running for himself.
All right.
But the D-backs would have the option to use a player like Jake. You would have to start on the bench. They would have the option to insert Jake McCarthy into the game at any point in the game in order to act as a designated pinch runner. But it wouldn't. Carson Kelly would still be in the game. So you're not like losing your catcher or something by doing that.
They're also testing a single disengagement rule per at bat, which means that they could only throw over one time. And if they don't get them on that toss over, then any subsequent toss over where they weren't successfully getting the runner out, it would then be a balk and they would move forward. So again, obviously that one makes sense. Doesn't make sense. I don't really like the disengagement rule much in the first place, let alone
you can just
dwindling it down.
Pretty soon it's going to be you can't throw over.
You just can't throw over. There's no more throwing over to the base to keep them in check. Only the catcher can do that, right?
That would be wild. Yeah. The leads that teams would start to take off first base.
I mean, I'm not thrilled with that one, but I also don't really care. Like, that doesn't bother me. I don't think that'll happen, but I understand them testing it to see if maybe less disengagements makes it even better. But this one, buckle up. This one's the roller coaster, known as the double hook rule or the DH rule.
This one is just wild.
It allows clubs to use a designated hitter throughout the game, provided that the club's starting pitcher has completed at least 5 innings. If the starter fails to make it through the 5th, the club then loses the DH for the remainder of the game. Thus, the pitcher, whether it is the starting, well, it wouldn't be the starting pitcher because he would have left the game. So, thus, relief pitchers would have to pitch. Could you still use a pinch hit?
Would have,
or hit. They'd have to hit, or you could use pinch hitters, right?
You could still use pinch hitters, but it would be the way that it would be the way that it was not long ago for the National League, where you just cycle through all your bench players pretty quickly,
right?
Just using them as pinch hitters.
Yeah.
So, this one is weird. I think there's a lot of nuance to this one. Like, I kind of wonder if it would sort of devalue the DH spot a little bit, because even if you feel really good about your starting rotation, you're still every once in a while going to have a starter who doesn't complete 5 innings. And maybe on days where you have your less steady starters going, right? Like if you have your 4th or 5th starter going, maybe you want to move your DH down in the lineup, like you probably don't want your best hitter to be DHing, in the middle of the lineup, because you might lose them if something goes wrong. And then you'd also have teams like, if a guy's in the 5th inning, right, 3rd time through the order, struggling, giving up hits, giving up runs, but you really want to keep your DH, you might just have to let that guy eat it for a little bit and see if they can just complete the inning so that you keep your DH through the remainder of the game.
That's incredible.
It's weird. I mean, there's just so much there, and that's one that I don't like. The designated pinch runner, you can identify, all right, they want more stolen bases, they want more action on the base paths. That's clear. This one, I guess they want pitchers. They want to incentivize pitchers going deeper into games, which is something that obviously has been cut back in recent years.
But how many times would the Diamondbacks have lost their designated hitter this year with the way they're starting rotation?
Oh, yeah. Going, right? That's I mean, it's maybe like 50-50, something like that.
Right?
I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but the D-backs would have lost their DH a number of times, and you'd have to protect for that. Like, you'd have to know that can happen. You'd have to probably move your DH down in the lineup. You'd maybe want, you'd want to prioritize your best hitters being in the field rather than being in the DH spot, because then they're sort of protected from that.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of weird things that would happen with that rule.
They're also testing hitting a ball into a small hole in right field that would then initiate multi-ball, where multiple baseballs would shoot out of cannons onto the field.
I believe it.
I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there. But I guess the idea here is that what's the potential for them actually implementing this stuff? Do you think these are just like crazy variations kind of what they're already implementing, just to see how, like actual experimentation to see how this impacts a baseball game? Or do you think these are actual like things to come down the road for Major League Baseball?
I mean, the Atlantic League, I don't want to take a shot at the Atlantic League, but like there's sort of a hierarchy with how far these experiments make it, right? If something gets to AAA, then it's all right, we're serious about this.
Okay.
If something's at the Atlantic League, it is the very initial,
one step above Savannah Bananas, basically.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. I mean, you're still just kind of like making stuff up and seeing what happens. I know they're also experimenting. I don't know if it was the Atlantic League or somewhere else. They were experimenting with a pre-tacked baseball, that would, help with all of the weird sticky stuff, restrictions, all the issues that have happened with Max Scherzer and whatnot. They also are making that ball brighter. So it would simultaneously sort of help pitchers, and that the baseball is tacked. We don't have to deal with all of these issues. But yeah, it would also theoretically make it easier for hitters to see the ball and do more damage. So there's all sorts of things that are being tested. I'm not taking anything too seriously until we get up to, AA, AAA.